Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Art History, the Female Perspective. Today, we are going to look at an artist from the early 19th century called Leonor Fini. Um, Leonor was born in Argentina in 1907, but moved to um, Trieste, Italy, where she was brought up by her mother, and basically living in a matriarchal family. Uh, not very many men around her at that time. She is a self-taught artist. She never went to school, and she became remarkably well known in the surrealist movement. Um, One of the few women in that movement. She never joined officially because it was dominated by men, and she did not want um, to have that kind of influence around her. So she decided to make her art, but not really belong to any kind of movement. One of her first pieces was called The Lying Woman. Um, it's a woman, as you can see, in repose, wearing a white garment, flowing across a very uh, sturdy, heavy, dark chair. Um, Basically, kind of like um, representing this sort of power dynamics. And she was trying to subvert the traditional art depictions that were made. She also wanted to explore femininity and identity. Um, this was a theme throughout her life. One of her next pieces, called Greed, as you can see, is a woman who looks maybe greedy. I don't know, but as you can see, all around her are cakes and sweets, and uh, it's basically depicting luxury and excess. Uh, it's sort of a commentary on material desire, I would think. Um, Leonor Fini, was born before the war, but uh, before the Second World War, actually before the First World War too. But uh, her her work continued throughout the war, and she also did physical pieces like this piece here, called A Threefold Lacquer Screen, from 1930. You can see the human figures kind of move, female human figures kind of in movement and transformation. Um, it was kind of one of her early works, combining sort of the traditional and surreal elements. She did do other, styles, not just surrealist styles. This is more of an expressionist style, um, called Female Portrait Number 45. It's, kind of uh, exploring the connection of myth and nature, and contemplation uh, of the feminine and the mystique of the feminine, um, in a very obviously expressive manner. Like I said, this is more of an expressionistic type of painting. Although she did mostly do surrealist, she did not stick to that. Um, this next piece is very surreal, surrealist style. The intermission of the apotheosis. Um, in French, the original title is in French. I'll try to pronounce it: L'Entracte de Apothéose. Um, that's, obviously surreal figures that are transforming. I think she was exploring the themes of identity and the subconscious, which, is a lot of what the exploration of the surrealists did. Um, their work was exploring the subconscious mostly. Um, but hers is, if you look at some of the work by the men of that movement, which it mostly was male dominated, this painting is more sort of the female version of that softer, um, uh, curvier, the female curves, and just kind of, the subconscious of the female, not the subconscious of the male, um, which is what, like I said before, most surrealist uh, art pieces were about. Um, this next piece is a portrait of Merritt Oppenheim, who was also a surrealist artist. Uh, it's, a very monochromatic background, one color, bright red. It really contains the figure, and you know um, I would say it gives it quite a bit of life and expression. Again, not a surreal painting per se, but not an expressionist either. She was always exploring different techniques and things. Uh, do, she didn't just paint, she did a lot of stuff which is more which she sort of followed up more after the Second World War. This is a self-portrait of herself, obviously self-portrait with a scorpion. You can see in her hand, underneath the glove, you can see the tail of the scorpion. Um, it, it kind of depicts her self-confidence and defiance against the world as it was, and it's a very, very strong um, uh, statement of her uh, uh, herself. It's she's really, you can see in that painting she's a very strong individual. Um, this next painting is called The Alcove, an interior with three women. Um, it's dark, but it's very kind of oppressive. Everything is very contained. Obviously, an alcove is, a small little enclosed area. Um, but it's kind of like portrays the an emotional and psychological tension between the women, and um, themes of identity, of being a woman and interacting with other women. And she was never married, she'd had no children. She was very much into exploring sort of non-binary ideas at the time. Um, that wasn't even a word, but she was very open to different things of that time, including um, the movement itself, the surrealist movement. Here's another self-portrait, um, again with that really, really direct gaze, that self-assuredness and complexity. Um, it's very, 1941, that's a very sort of non-traditional, free-form uh, expression of being a woman at that time. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like. That's, obviously during the war, she was living in Paris up until that point. She did move to the south of Italy and basically lived there until the end of the war. Um, and, continued to paint. Another very much surrealist painting, but of women. uh, the divine, the shepherdess of the divine sphinxes. She really was, she did a lot of work with mythological themes, especially when they portrayed uh, female strength and agency. Uh, Very much ahead of her time, and very interesting. And as you can see so far, she has not um, painted many men. Most of her paintings are women. When she does paint men, like this one, the man with the masks you can see behind him, um, the man is very androgynous and looks very vulnerable, basically because he's not wearing any clothes, and he's sort of encompassed by this darkness with these masks floating around behind him. Um, you know, maybe as a again another theme of identity. At this point, um, she was also and I'm not going to bring any of that, um, that her artwork of that style in. She did a lot of uh, work in theater, both making costumes and sets. She authored books. Um, so she did more than just do paintings. And, I think it would be kind of interesting if you wanted to explore it a bit more to see what kind of, theatrical costumes and work she did. Um, so again, Man with Masks, 1949. So obviously after the war, at which point she moved back to Paris. Another pretty surrealistic painting called The Ideal Life. Um, she was very much a cat person, as you can see. She was very much into the mysterious and uh, the subconscious, the feminine subconscious, and to her that was represented by cats. This woman here is just, she looks pretty rebellious and uh, mysterious at the same time. Surrounded, like, who is she? What is she doing? What is that thing behind her? Um, just really interesting work. The ideal life. I guess for her, the ideal life would be surrounded by cats. Uh, Good thing she was not allergic to them. So, anyway, another example of how she did not just keep in with doing surrealist. This is again a very impressionistic type of painting called Girlfriends, done in 1952. Um, it's a softer look, but she was always exploring uh, and refining techniques, and it's pretty interesting for someone who never uh, actually went to school. She just, she went to museums a lot and looked at sort of Renaissance. She really loved Renaissance paintings, but, she more or less developed her own style, which ranged quite a bit from this type of impressionist um, painting to a very, very um, uh, conservative type of portrait. This was a portrait of Princess Nawal Tusun, who was an Egyptian princess. Her and her husband were exiled and lived their life in Paris. Um, this is, again with the cats and the women, very classical pose, very classical style and painting, very realistic. Um, then it goes to this one here, the Guardian of the Phoenix, which could be obviously almost the other side of the coin, as it were. Um, It's again a mythical being, a female mythical being. She kind of takes mythology and then turns it into what she wants it to be. Um, Obviously, the egg, the birth and regeneration of life and the world, and again, another very feminine um, symbolism of the feminine of the feminine. This is, I think, one of my most favorite paintings of hers, called the um, it's called La Guardiana del Huevo Negro, the guardian of the black egg. Obviously, um, the egg, again, a rebirth, um, the sort of protection of potential something, uh, the potential of a future being, obviously. Um, in a way, she's protecting it, but her hands aren't touching it either. It's just in her lap, but around her, it's, dark and red and scary looking. Um, so, in that lap, in those colors, that pale yellow, the blue, um, it's protected, but it's left, I guess it's left its individuality, because she's not trying to form it or smother it with her hands. That would be my impression of that painting, which again I think is very beautiful. Um, this next one is quite funny, actually. The useless toilette, or La Toilette in Tuile. Um, I think she's kind of referring to, again, another very sort of impressionistic painting. You know, it's just a bunch of basically strokes and dots that combine together to form this image, which, if you looked really closely, wouldn't really exist uh, um, up close. Very much impressionistic, obviously. Um, it's an abstract form, in a way, chaotic. And I think it's kind of commenting on the transience of humans, the transience of life, that we don't live forever, that things are always changing all the time, including um, yourself. So, another, speaking of yourself or herself, self portrait, uh, very, um, again, very contained, but with these bright bursts of color, especially that hat. Uh, it's like, a pretty big statement here. Um, from what I read about it, it's kind of an introspection. It's a public persona versus the creative spirit. And it's a very beautiful composition, and the colors are so vibrant. And even though around her is all this vibrancy, her face and body really stand out even more so. And you would usually think that that was the opposite of what would happen. So, another very interesting, and you can really see her range of artistic styles that she delves into. Compared to this one here, which is 2 years afterwards, but obviously in between there's all kinds of things happening. 1970. Um, Very minimal detail, um, but it kind of focuses on uh, emotion and presence. If you you know, can understand what I mean here. It's very contained, but there's a lot of emotion in that face. And again, if you zoomed up really close to it, it would be nothing but, strokes of a brush. Again, very impressionistic. And still onward, the next piece from 1971, Narcisse Incomparable. I'm sorry, my French is pretty bad. Um, Obviously, it's a reflection, another male, which, like I mentioned before, is not that common in her work, male figures. This male is another kind of androgynistic type of male. You see him completely in full in life, or like in the present, but underneath him you see his reflection, also complete. And then beside him you only see legs, but the reflection in the water is obviously of a female. And I think it's also kind of a commentary on the difference between men and women in some way. I think this painting, the female figure in the water, in the reflection, is so much deeper, I would say. I don't know if this is obviously my own commentary on it, but it's almost like, uh, is she saying that women are deeper? Is there sort of a deeper um, spiritualness of women, a deeper psyche, um, or is it just that she doesn't, can't delve into the male psyche that much? Uh, but again, her her artwork is mostly focused on the female form and the feminine. So in 1984, there's another very surrealistic painting called Memory of Past Fragments. Um, Sort of visions, dreamlike, that very, very surrealist type of artistry. Um, the inner workings, the subconscious, the dreams, the visions. That white figure obviously could be a dream. It looks like, well, there's one female, but it looks like there's a lot of men surrounding this kind of dreamlike, ghost-like figure, this woman. Um, Another, you know, one of her sort of surrealist attempts there. And then right beside it, you have Red Vision, which I also really like. Uh, instead of the ghost being white or the spirit being white, it's red. Um, and I don't know, is that like sort of the idea of how we perceive things? There's this black silhouette looking out the window, and there's this ghost like girl, which you would think would be the one that would be floating above, but on the ground. So it's kind of like, how we perceive things, how do we imagine things, and turning that around and changing it to suit what she wants to say, and not what is a conventional thing to have been said. So the next painting is called Retour de Voyage, The Return Voyage, 1985, kind of blending realism with surrealism. Um, the woman is in a very contemplative state. It has a very oriental feeling to it. Um, And again, the subject is really, really highlighted, which is quite interesting because the colors are so bold and strong that you would think they would overtake, but it's kind of reversed. It's uh, the subject is very strong, even though the colors are very strong. Is all I can say. Uh, it's really interesting. I really like this painting as well. Um, I like the way that the circle behind her almost looks like a halo, but is black. Excuse me. My dog is making noises, and he's now going to be in this video, or his voice will be in this video. Okay, so this is called the Retour de Voyage, and finally we have a Fried Caryatid, which I can't even pronounce. Um, uh, Basically, a release, a transformation, uh, a release from constraints. Like they're taking all that wrapping off that female figure, so she will be able to move. And very interestingly, and transform as well, move, transform, change, be something else, take off these restraints. And one of the interesting things is that this is the last known painting that she did before her death, which also happened. Well, actually, she died 10 years later, but she did not paint anymore. um, this is one of the last photographs of her. She I think after, she did a lot of costume designs, authored in theater and sets, and authored a lot of books. She died in January 1996, January 18th, in Paris. And she had so many talents. She was a very, very interesting woman, and it's important that we learn about these women because we learn about surrealist painters like Dali, and filmmakers like Buñuel, and they're all male, which is fine, but the female voice has been lost for so long that it's really great, even for myself, just to learn about these different female artists that did exist, um, but have never really been promoted or talked about. So um, that is the life of Leonor Fini. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and have a good day, everybody. Talk to you later.